Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to the STP webinar, the topic for which is Ask Me Anything with Michael Bolton. Our speaker for the day, as is obvious by the title, is Michael Bolton. I'm Smita Mishra, a professional tester myself, and I'm excited to host you all and Michael on our STP webinars. Quick information for all of you. The next upcoming conference we have is Spring 2019 STPCon, which will be held at San Francisco from April 1st to 4th this year. The program is up for your review. The topics range across automation, AI, machine learning, DevOps, performance testing, leadership, mobile testing, security, and much more. So if you plan to attend the upcoming conference, don't forget there are also various offers for the alumni attendees and team registrations. Should you have any queries, do email them to info@softwaretestpro.com. And the hotel discount actually ends on 8th of March, so please be mindful of that if you plan to attend it. So Michael, did you get a chance to look at the conference program and any selections so far on what sessions and workshops you are looking forward to? I know you have attended it earlier, STPCon, so happy to see you again there.
I'm looking forward to mine. Those are the ones I have to focus on, of course. I noticed there's a large number of old friends there and a bunch of new ones too. And I'd also like to emphasize the significance of not just the conference sessions themselves, but also the importance of chatting with people in the hallways, chatting with people at lunch and at dinner, the chatting with people at breaks, the social aspects of the conference, the informal and free form kind of conversations that you have at the conference, because that's what conferences are all about, conferring. So I encourage people to do that, to absolutely check out the track sessions and the keynotes and so on, but also engage with the presenters. This is something which people don't do as much as they might. Every presenter there wants to talk to people. If they didn't, they wouldn't be presenters, right? They wouldn't be there. So to those of you for whom it's your first conference, or if you feel a little shy, that's okay. Go up, introduce yourself, say hello, tell people where you're working and what you're working on, or identify friends that you might have in common, talk about the experiences that you've had at the conference, ask questions, make that part of your experience at the conference.
Yep. So, and of course, I see that, like you said, you're looking forward to yours because you have a keynote and
I got so much work to do. Oh my goodness.
2 full day workshops, yes, and then sessions too. So, and your sessions are always hugely popular. So, do you want to share some background to what you are going to speak on?
Well, let's see. I've got 4 items on the menu. One is a one-day workshop on critical thinking for testers, in which we explore one of the primary aspects of the testing mindset, which is to recognize that a huge part of testing is all about not being fooled. It's our job as testers not to be fooled, to be skeptical, productively skeptical, to be professionally uncertain about the product when everybody else is sure about it. So critical thinking is an important aspect of that. Critical thinking is thinking about thinking with the intention of avoiding being fooled. Then we have a one-day rapid introduction to rapid software testing, in which we will look at a very fast overview of what would otherwise be a 3-day class, which we now call Rapid Software Testing Explained. And in that class, we give an overview in both classes, both the short version and the long version. We give an overview of the rapid software testing mindset and skill set, which is about doing the fastest, least expensive we can do that still completely fulfills the mission of testing. The mission of testing being to evaluate the product by learning about it through exploration and experimentation with a special focus on seeking problems, seeking trouble, looking for problems, exploring and investigating risk, so that our clients can decide whether the product they've got is the product they want. I'm also doing a talk on testers as their own worst enemies. I was in the Rapid Software Testing Slack forum earlier today, and one of the participants in that forum pointed out that very few testers are able to articulate their work, the nature of their work and the value of their work. And I think this is a great pity, because it means that unless we are able to talk clearly and precisely and with the appropriate focus on what our job is, which is to find problems that matter, then we're going to be systematically undervalued. So one of the things I'm going to examine in that keynote talk is how we make systematic mistakes in that and how we can get better at them. The last talk I'm going to do, not get better at the mistakes, get better at our rhetoric and our descriptions of our work. The next talk that I've got on the docket is a talk on rapid software testing in agile contexts, and in that talk, what I'll be looking at is a kind of refactoring of the agile testing quadrants, the famous ones originally developed by Brian Merrick based on work by Kem Kainer, and then revised twice by Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory. James Bach and I, several years ago, charted out a new set of quadrants. The primary thing that's in common with the older versions is the focus on high value of the product, low cost of development. Otherwise, they don't look terribly similar, but I think it's a useful kind of refactoring, and we'll talk about that when we get there. So those are the four things that I'll be bringing to people at the conference. I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you so much, Michael. It actually looks like an entire bouquet of testing knowledge. So I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to attend your class, and I definitely am.
Oh, it'd be great to see you there. It'd be nice to see you again.
Yes. All right. So moving forward for today's webinar, quick piece of information again that I have for you is there is an upcoming webinar solving performance problems with AI on 13th March by Mark Tomlinson. Mark is the puzzle master and performacologist, as he likes to call himself, at Freedom Pay, and he's a very well-known authority on performance testing. So the link is up for you all to review and register. Please go for it. And if you are on Twitter, please share the conference information and about this webinar with your followers, connections. You can also add STP's Twitter handle to your tweets, which is at SoftwareTestPro. You can also please note down Michael's Twitter handle, which is at Michael Bolton. All right, so let's get started with the webinar today. A very warm welcome, Michael. We are very thrilled to have you with us today. And let me quickly introduce you for all of us here. Michael Bolton is a consulting software tester and testing teacher who helps people to develop testing, who helps people to solve testing problems that they didn't realize they could solve. Since 2006, he has been the co-author with James Bach of Rapid Software Testing, the RST methodology, and Mindset for Testing Software Expertly and Credibly in Uncertain Conditions and Under Extreme Time Pressure, and has flown over 1 million miles to teach RST in 35 countries. Michael has over 25 years of experience into testing, developing, managing, and writing about software. For last 18 years, he has led DevelopSense, a Toronto-based testing and development consultancy. Prior to that, he was with QuarterDeck Corporation for 8 years, during which he managed the company's flagship products and directed project and testing teams both in-house and around the world. So let me get started with the Ask Me Anything session now. Overall, we received over 35 questions from 12 countries, and we shall try to cover as many as we can during this hour. I shall mention the questioner's name and the question category as I read out the questions to Michael, and he shall then respond to the same. Okay, so I'm heading on to my first one. It's by Scott Milliner. The question category is automation. What has been your experience with AI solutions in driving agile QA?
I am about to embark on a project in which machine learning is an important component as a project manager, but as a kind of testing-oriented project manager for it. I have to say I don't quite understand the question in terms of its motivation. I could tell you what the question. I could give you that fact, but I don't see exactly how that would help you. Maybe Scott is asking about whether I found AI to be helpful, or whether I've applied it in a testing context. And I haven't. But here's what I can say about AI. The claims that people are making about it, to me, are unfortunately unsupportable and outrageous. And they're based on a model of testing that I don't think makes very much sense. The first thing is, a lot of people claim that automation or AI can do stuff better than a human tester. It cannot. And there is one overwhelming reason why it cannot, and that is that AI does not know about intention. AI does not comprehend human intention. AI is not socialized. It's not. It doesn't have social goals. It doesn't have any particular goal other than the ones that we give it. Now, if we chose to use machine learning and artificial intelligence, both of which, by the way, are metaphors, they are not to be taken literally. Artificial intelligence is not intelligent in any kind of sense that maps to human intelligence. Machine learning is not learning. The machines don't actually learn. What they do is they refine algorithms that they've been given with a instruction to focus on a particular kind of outcome. And to the degree that they can be used as tools, I think that's actually great. But we've got to start thinking about them in terms of tools and not in terms of some kind of magic wand that is magically going to do this stuff. AI and ML, when you see those things, replace them in your mind with RSS. Reasonably, or even remarkably sophisticated software. But let's remember, please, that it is just software. They are just tools, and they can be helpful. They may help us to see patterns. They may help us to identify factors that we did not think of as important, and we might recognize the importance of those factors with the help of this tool. But tools are tools. Tools are extensions of what humans do. That's one thing. Another thing is that one very interesting application of artificial intelligence, it seems to me, is for us to use it as a kind of lens and a mirror to help us understand what we're like, to help us understand our models of the world, to revise our models of the world, to help us do that, but not to surrender to them. And I worry about that, because this is yet another instance in which humanity is starting to play with tools that, when they are unsupervised or used in an irresponsible way, can be very dangerous. We already know about some of the stories about this. For instance, Ash Coleman, who is a tester that I respect and that I admire, is a Black woman. And she has a much harder time getting things like loans and mortgages than white males do. What worries me about that is that these tools, artificial intelligence and machine learning tools, will amplify that problem and not resolve it. That's a very big danger. And so there's I would like to see testers thinking in a much more critical way about this software, as we should think critically about all software. It wouldn't be me unless there were some book references. So let me give you a couple. There's a book which I believe that testers involved with AI and machine learning should read. It's called Artificial Unintelligence by a very capable, skilled, diversified woman who teaches journalism and who has employed these techniques in applying artificial intelligence and machine learning stuff to journalism, but she also does so from a very critical perspective. She recognizes the extents and limits of what these things can do very well. It's a fantastic book. And I think the subtitle is What Machines Still Don't Understand. Another excellent book, Harry Collins, Artificial Intelligence, subtitle there is Against Humanity's Surrender to Computers. And what Harry's concerned about is not the singularity, but the surrender, the idea that we will abdicate our responsibility to supervise these tools if we don't pay attention. And there's some wonderful tests in there of how we might decide whether we've achieved artificial intelligence or not, and the basic answer so far and for the foreseeable future is we're nowhere near it, and we're not going to get anywhere near it. All that said, what these tools can do can be awfully impressive, but let's use them responsibly, and let's think about the limits of what they can do and the errors that we can introduce in our thinking when we abdicate our responsibility there.
So thank you for your insight into the AI query, Michael. It actually makes me not be so scared of AI now. More scared in terms of what it could do, but also feel more confident as a tester that it's not replacing me right away.
Well, you know, all you need to do is study it a little bit, but don't study the drum beaters for it. Be a tester and look critically at it. And we'll realize that we have little to worry about. In fact, the one thing that we must do as testers is up our skills. Once again, testing is going to change because the environments around us change. The applications of software change. So people are going to be both using AI and ML in the software that they're producing, and the tools will be informed by that stuff to some degree as well. So it behooves us as testers to look at those things critically, because that's what we do as testers. We think critically about software. That's our job. So read the critics. Don't just read the marketers and the hype mongers. Read the critics of this stuff and think critically about them yourself. Think, how could I be fooled by this stuff?
Wow. Very interestingly, our next question is pretty similar to it almost is in continuation to what we are talking. So Todd asks under the leadership category, do you have any suggestions for questions or strategies to use in interviews to determine a candidate's critical thinking skills?
Sure. What I would do is I would ask a tester a normal question, a standard stock kind of question, any kind of question you like, and then immediately challenge the tester upon hearing his or her answer. Okay, how could you be wrong about that? What factors went into your answer when you answered this? If we're talking about critical thinking specifically, remember, critical thinking is thinking about thinking with the intention of avoiding being fooled. So one way I might do that, for example, is to ask a question about a stock overworn and usually uncritically examined statement about testing itself. A product or a problem discovered in production is 10,000 times as expensive to fix as a problem found during requirements development. So how do you respond to that? How do you react to that statement? And what I would like to hear from a tester in those circumstances, I would like to hear that that's a heuristic. First of all, it doesn't have any basis in valid measurement. However, it has a certain kind of usefulness to suggest that a product might be expensive to fix, more expensive to fix in production than in requirements development, might be. That sometimes we don't understand the nature of a problem, or we don't understand the possibility of a problem until we've had experience with that problem. And therefore, we could not have anticipated in requirements documentation except with the benefit of hindsight. So, we can anticipate it for the next time, but we can't necessarily identify problems that are rare or hidden or subtle or emergent during requirements documentation, requirements development rather. So what I would look for is a more reflective kind of reply, an answer to that statement that pokes at it and that questions it, and that looks at how it might have the potential of fooling people. But it might be useful to keep in mind as a heuristic, a fallible way of solving a problem or engineering a solution to something. Another thing I would look for in the tester's reply are words that qualify what they're saying. That is to say, that put some hedges around it. For instance, for instance is an example in terms of a description of critical thinking in action, because it, for instance, gives an example of a possible scenario. And then to flip that over, on the other hand, and also, or maybe not yet, those kinds of fences around certainty, the preservation of skepticism. Those are the things that I look for in terms of evaluating a candidate's critical thinking skills and determining what their capabilities are in that department.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, actually. Since we are already halfway through the time, so I'm going to rush through a couple of questions quickly. Okay. So Philip asks, again, under the leadership category, what do you see as the biggest gap in training for new testers, and how do we, as leaders, bridge that gap?
I think one of the biggest problems for testers, as I mentioned earlier, is that testers are not always very good at expressing what it is that they do. A lot of testers lack certain kinds of rhetorical skill, the skill of precise expression. For instance, testers often say things like, well, I break the software. Testers do not break the software. Testers find where the software is broken. And even that's not really quite right. Testers don't break things. Testers break illusions. They break dreams. And the software isn't really broken. The software may be doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing, and yet, being perfectly functional and perfectly according to specification. But the relationship between the product and its intended audience and its intended users might be broken. So that is what's actually broken, it seems to me, because a product that is perfectly coded to a lousy spec, as Kem Kainer famously said, is not a perfect program, it's a lousy program. A product that does exactly what it's supposed to do and does so in a way that doesn't satisfy the user's task or the user's desires may not be broken, but the relationship there is broken. But on the other hand, that same product might be extraordinarily satisfactory to lots of other people as well. So getting testers to express what it is they actually do, which is we find out where the product has problems. That's one thing. And focusing the mindset of the tester on that. There's a lot of big problems associated with the way traditionally testing has been talked about. Testing, for example, it's a bête noire of mine, that testing is about test cases. Testing is not about test cases. Test cases are at best a guest in the house of testing. Testing is organized skepticism about a product. Testing is about experimentation. People say, oh, I test to make sure the product works. We do not test to make sure the product works. We do not test to make sure the product works. We test to find problems in the ways that the product works. And that might sound to some people like a fairly insignificant difference, but it's important because of this. It's important because if we seek to demonstrate that the product works, we will indeed demonstrate that the product works. But what we won't really be demonstrating is that the product works. We will be demonstrating that the product can work, that we can observe it doing something. But what we're looking for is how the product doesn't work, how it might not work, how it fails to fulfill its purpose, how it fails to satisfy people. That's super important. And that part of the skill of testers, it seems to me, is addressed very poorly in most places. But that's where James and I focus our work, training testers in the mindset and in the skill set to both think about how they approach testing and how they talk about it, so that we can be good representatives and advocates for our own work, and we can advance the quality of that work. That involves developing your vocabulary, developing your ability to describe your models, to describe your techniques, to describe the quality criteria associated with the product, to describe the elements of coverage that you want to apply in your testing. Those things are really important. They barely get talked about at all.
Wow, there are quite a few, and frankly, I think you mentioned it rightly that these test cases based testing has to go away, and people need to learn the vocabulary. A lot of times, especially when you just mentioned that testers are unable to communicate what they really are doing,
They
what their
struggle with it.
work is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the biggest struggle, like you just pointed out, is vocabulary. You don't know the right terms to use at the right place and be able to specify the exact detail.
Right, and there's an interaction between the way we talk and the way we think.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The way we think is framed to a great degree by the way we talk. And one of my favorite examples of that is you don't hear doctors saying stuff like, "Well, you're bad. You're bad. Your health is like not good. You've got sickness, disease." No,
Yeah.
doctors express themselves very precisely to one another. There is a big difference between viruses and bacteria. There's a big difference between a subdural hematoma and an epidural hematoma, right? That we talk about stuff like that because it matters. And what blows my mind is that the software development community, the programmers, have in many cases articulated some very important patterns in the way they think and the way they express themselves and the way they model the work that they're doing. Well, we should do that too. We should do that too. We should be every bit as expert in our domain as they are in theirs, more so even, because in order to find problems, we're dealing with an infinite space. The work of testing is kind of there's a lot of infinities involved with it, put it that way. It's the infinite art, as James Bach has said, the infinite art of comparing the invisible to the ambiguous with the intention of preventing the unthinkable from happening to the anonymous. so
Pretty
so
loaded
let's try
statement.
to identify who those anonymous people there. Let's try to identify risk in various different kinds of ways so that what was unthinkable becomes more thinkable.
Mhm. All right. Mm, should I move forward,
Yeah,
Michael?
let's go. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Stephen is asking a strategy question that is a mature engineering team one that no longer requires the specific role of tester?
Well, let's talk about roles. What is a role? Because role is a word that's overloaded, kind of like testing itself. As a person who works in a software development organization, I have one role. I'm an individual contributor. I contribute to the development of the product. I have another role too. I have a role of father and a role of husband. And those are important roles. And I am in those roles even as I'm working, but those roles kind of get subsumed while I'm doing software development work because it's hard to wear two hats at the same time. Similarly, I might be from one moment to the next, I might be a tester or I might be a developer. I might take on those roles as well. Now, my title might be engineer or a developer without, or member of technical staff, without reference to specific activities and specific commitments that I fulfill through the course of the day. So they're varying degrees or levels of roles that we could be talking about. The specific role of a tester, well, somebody better be in the testing role from time to time, because if we're not, what we are losing is a focus and a commitment to a particular task. The task that I mentioned earlier, the task of finding problems that matter to people. Now, even somebody who is a full-time developer, right? You've got the title developer, you may pop in to a testing role from time to time by evaluating the product through exploration and experimentation, learning about the product through that route. Developers do that. In fact, developers do that quite often. But here's the problem. When a developer is changing from the tester mindset, from the developer mindset to the tester mindset, that's hard. It's effortful. To switch from the perspective of envisioning the success of the product to anticipating failure in the product. And everybody can look at his or her own experience and see how that plays out. When you are writing something and you create this beautiful piece of writing, you look at it and you say, yep, I this looks good to go, and then you turn on spell checking and you find out, oh, there's a bunch of misspellings there. So you got tools helping you to recognize certain kinds of problems with your prose. And then you show it to somebody else, and somebody else says, oh my goodness, there's all these grammatical errors. And you show it to somebody else who's of a different kind of mindset, and they say, you know, your theme, your argument isn't being developed very well. And you show it to somebody else, and they will say, oh, you know, this here really supports your argument, but the unfortunate part of that is it's factually incorrect. So testing benefits from diverse perspectives. And the trouble with having nothing but developers doing the testing is that developers live more or less permanently in a developer kind of mindset. When testers are in a development, or when developers are in a development mindset, it's hard for them to get into the tester's mindset and develop critical thinking, a critical distance from the work that they're doing as developers. It's just hard to do that. And everybody has that experience because everybody has the experience of building something and other people being able to see problems in it right away. It is our contention, James and mine, that deep testing for rare or hidden or subtle or emergent or intermittent problems, especially those that are more in the domain of the people who are using the software or people who are documenting it or people who are supporting it, that it's hard for developers to jump over the mountain that lives between those spaces. And there's another factor too, which is developers, by and large, don't like testing. Most of them don't like testing very much. And if you don't like something, you're not going to get great at it. Now, there are certain dimensions of testing that developers are very good at, and that is finding problems that matter to developers. They tend to be pretty good at that, especially when they're looking at somebody else's code, that they've got sufficient critical distance to do code reviews and technical walkthroughs and stuff, and they're really good at that, especially with a little bit of training and a little bit of nudging in the direction of our job here is to find problems. But they're kind of naturally good at that. There's a kind of competitiveness among many programmers that helps them be good at that. But for other kinds of testing, for other forms of testing, developers find that an imposition, and rightly so. That's a feature, not a bug, that testers or that developers are able to focus on success rather than potential failure. So that's one aspect of the question. Another aspect of the question is this business of maturity. I have a fundamental distaste for the application of the word maturity to software development work. And one way to cut that short is to encourage people to look at my blog with a Google search for Weinberg and maturity in the same post. And Jerry had some very pointed things to say about maturity, that models of software development are not more or less mature. That's inappropriate, it seems to me. They're more or less fitting. They're more or less fitting. So if you're in an engineering team, what you've got to decide is whether it fits for us to have a tester here or not. Now, my argument, of course, would be most of the time it absolutely does. But it's your job to decide whether you want to have a tester on your team. Maturity, after all, in biology and in social contexts, means precisely this. It means, are you old enough to and grown up enough, if you like, to live without your parents, right? To work without, to exist without being supervised, to fend for yourself in the world. So a mature team is one that makes its own decisions. not one that depends on a capability maturity model set up by some institute, or a test maturity model set up by some other institute. Maturity is just the wrong way to look at it. It seems to me maturity models have it backwards. They're the ones who are saying you should do this, which is exactly the opposite of what maturity means in most other contexts. So I'll leave that at that.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to take two questions together, Michael, because both of them are around automation and asking a similar kind of opinion or discussion. So I'm just going to read out both the questions for you right now.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So Megan Thompson asks, what question has automation answered best for you, and are there any uh, thoughts that it would answer? Sorry, or are there any that you thought it would answer that did not? And similarly, there's another question, which is around automation by Marlon. Uh, he asks, describe the most efficient way to structure a team of QA personnel that has to support 5 dev teams. The aim is to grow, scale, as well as be able to meet automation goals and testing goals.
I get very cranky on subjects like this. Here, let me see if this helps at all. Automation, 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 automation. There, is everybody happy now? Automation is not the goal. Automation is not the goal. Automation doesn't answer questions. We answer questions, and tools help us to answer questions. Tools help us to answer questions. Humans use tools. We use tools all the time. We've used tools ever since before we were humans. There's some evidence for that, in that there's things in the archaeological record that suggest that proto-humans, the species before Homo sapiens sapiens, used various kinds of rocks and tools and axes and so on for getting stuff done. It is as natural for humans to use tools almost as it is for us to walk upright. And indeed, if you look at some of our primate relatives, you will see that they are using tools in order to get stuff done. Chimps, for example, various kinds of monkeys will stick sticks into the ground and pull up grubs with them. So we use tools all the time. It's natural for us to use tools. But automation does not answer a single question for us. It helps us do that. It helps us do that. And that's important because we must remain in charge. Moreover, at times like these, I like to refer to Marshall McLuhan, who is a Canadian futurist and media theorist. And what McLuhan pointed out is that tools have this position with respect to us. They extend us. They enable us to do things. They amplify what we do, or what we want. They accelerate or intensify. So extend, enable, enhance, accelerate, intensify. These are the things that tools do for us. But the tools are agnostic about what they're amplifying or accelerating. And I've said this over and over, and I'm going to keep saying it apparently for the rest of my life, which is that tools extend us in every direction at the same time, to the extent that we are virtuous, that we are skillful testers, that we are skeptical and critical. Then tools amplify our ability to be skeptical and critical, that they extend our skill, that they extend our virtuousness. But to the degree that we are bad testers, that we do lousy work, then tools will allow us to do bad work faster and worse than we've ever done it before. In other words, if I want to use tools, I've got to be very careful about the potential that I'm accelerating my incompetence just as quickly as I'm accelerating my competence. That I might be using a tool to take a very detailed look at exactly the wrong thing. That I might be using tools to check things that are not important to be checked. And I might be able to do more irrelevant or useless checks than I was able to do without the use of that particular tool. However, all that said, let's talk about the positive aspects of tools. The positive aspects of tools lie in our ability to get stuff done more comprehensively. So tools can be used to probe into the internals of the product. They can allow us to see things that we wouldn't be able to see on our own. Tools can allow us to generate volumes of data and with variations in that data that we would never be able to do on our own. Humans are really, really lousy at behaving randomly, for instance. And tools can help us to induce variation. Tools can help us to visualize things and to demonstrate things. One of the things, I've got another talk called The Secret Life of Testers, in which James and I developed a tool in order to visualize where testing time is going. And the cool thing about that is that it provides this kind of eye-popping display, which led us to several kinds of epiphanies about where testing time is going, that if we just kind of talked about it or rendered it down into a table of numbers, it wouldn't have the same resonance. So tools can help us to visualize things, which is pretty cool. Tools can help us parse enormous volumes of data very, very efficiently. I used a tool one time to generate a whole bunch of scenarios for an essay that I was writing on estimation. You can find that in my blog on project estimation and black swans. If you do a keyword search on those things, you can do it. Oh, and tools can help us do keyword searches too. So I use tools to extend and enhance my capacity to explore and experiment with the product, and not just to check it. And here's where I see this turning into a problem. What we are doing now is I see more and more, is we are taking some pretty bad test case focused testing and using tools to turn that confirmation demonstration focused testing, which just barely has an element of testing to it at all, and we're using tools to do that on a massive scale. That comes with a cost, and the cost is the development and the maintenance and the transfer cost. That is what it takes to explain the tool to other people who are going to come along and inherit it and have to maintain it themselves. There's also a cost associated with interpreting the results from the tool, and for the capacity for being fooled by the tool, and the opportunity cost. I am observing testers who are going to extraordinary amounts of time and effort to get machines to push buttons. And yet button pushing is not what testing is about. Test cases are not what testing is about. And that argument or that statement gets amplified by James Bach and Aaron Hodder, and a quick Wikipedia search, or a Google search rather, will reveal that pretty quickly. But tools have wonderful uses, but we are the ones who wield them, and we've got to be careful about the way we use tools. You can also look at our rather long essay, kind of monograph, called A Context-Driven Approach to Automation in Testing, where this idea gets developed more deeply than I can do here.
I'm kind of aware of your thoughts on automation since I've been following you for a while. So I'm not surprised at your response. Uh, and I could actually go on and on and talk more about it with you, but I know that we're falling short on time. So I'm going to take one of the questions that we have just received from in our webinar, and I'm going to try to ask you that. Okay. So it's from Ankit, and it says, for an established legacy product which does not have a testing strategy and does not have testers and are falling short in terms of quality, how can they start and what should their milestones be like? Also, how can we state this as an actionable problem to the organization?
The organization has already stated an actionable problem. What was the actionable problem? The actionable problem was something about the quality of the product, right? I have a copy of this question in front of me, so I'm going to read this one myself and try to parse it because it's a question that's got a lot of hair on it. Let's see. Oh, yes. A desktop. What number was that question, Smita? Can you help me out?
I just messaged you, Michael. This is a live question we are getting from our attendee,
Oh,
one
a
of the
live
attendees.
question. Oh,
Yeah.
excuse
So I
me. I'm sorry. Pardon me.
sent it to
Um,
you in the
there it is.
chat.
An established legacy product which does not have a testing strategy, does not have testers, falling short in terms of quality. So the question, how do we state this as an actual problem to the organization? You've already stated it. It's falling short in terms of quality. What's going on is that people don't understand the product well enough to address those quality problems. So believe it or not, that is a test strategy, or at least it's an element of a test strategy. There are problems in the product. Let's start with that. Now, what is a test strategy? A test strategy is the set of ideas that guide your choice of tests. Not test cases, but how you will experiment with the product, how you will explore it. So even though that's a very, very vague and very non-specific strategy, there's an element to it. And the first element is that there is some dimension of quality that we're going to, that somebody has declared is not good enough somehow. There are quality problems, falling short in terms of quality. Okay, so first step is to establish what dimensions of quality are important. What are we falling down on? What aspects of quality do we want to examine as testers with our experiments? And what dimensions of quality do we want to preserve? Because if the product is doing anything at all, if you can point to it and say, there be the product, even if it doesn't start, you can say that some dimension of quality has been fulfilled. The dimension of quality is we have an identifiable product. So even if it's terrible, there's a product, and we have some ideas about it. And at least to some degree, there's some code that exists. So an element of quality has been fulfilled. If the product does something, anything, then it appears probably to meet some requirement to some degree. So first element that I might approach here is to identify what are the dimensions of quality. Now, in rapid software testing, as I said earlier, we train people with a vocabulary and with models that help them think about this in more powerful ways. So we identify quality criteria like capability, reliability, usability, charisma, security, scalability, compatibility, performance, installability, and then development-related, internally focused dimensions of quality like supportability, testability, maintainability, portability, and localizability. All right, so what we do is we develop our strategy and we talk to our clients in the project, and we have discussions about that. We come to understand what our clients value. And when we do that, then we have certain kinds of focuses for our testing. They don't care that much about performance. It's okay if the product is tolerably slow. but they do care a whole lot about reliability and trustworthiness and a consistency of results and that sort of stuff. And maybe they care a little bit less about usability because maybe the product is used by specialists in a particular domain, and they're willing to sacrifice some level of ease of learning in exchange for ease of use. A classical example of that might be a developer who just absolutely loves his VI, or a tester or a developer who loves her Emacs. Well, those products are famously difficult to learn, but they're really easy to use. So one thing we might say is learnability about this product is not a big deal. Then, as a development of our strategy, we need to consider how we're going to model the product in terms of its elements and the things around it, the factors that we would want to examine during a test or that could change the outcome of our testing. And those we think of in terms of structure, function, data, interfaces, platform, operations, and time. And then we think about techniques by which we would come to know about the product, testing techniques like function testing, domain testing, stress testing, flow testing, scenario testing, claims testing, user testing, risk-based testing, automated checking. And we would think about oracles by which we would recognize problems in the product. And we think about the project environment, factors that influence our choices and our resources and our relationships in the product. In the project, rather. Those things get wrapped up for us in rapid software testing under the heuristic test strategy model. And you can look that up once again in Google. The question of how we put those things together is extremely context dependent. And the HTSM is a kind of framework or a checklist for evaluating certain things that we might like to talk about. It's not a template and it's not gospel. That is to say, it is not something that you follow. That's not our intention for it. It's something that you might apply in developing a strategy. But you've always got a strategy because you always have some set of ideas that are guiding your choices in testing. Question is it explicit? Is it conscious? Can you describe it with to other people? Can you share it with other people? Can you critique it with other people? So that's where I'd start on that project. You've got a testing strategy. What you need to do is develop it and refine it. That's where I'd start. As for milestones, that is so context dependent that I can't give you a good answer without some help from you, the questioner. But in development work, we would certainly do that, and of course, we help with that. That's what we want to do, both as testers and as consulting software testers, as James and I are.
Thanks, Michael. That was quite a detailed response for this, and we are running over time, so we will have to stop here. I know we tried to do quite a few questions, and I know that quite a few of you have not got your responses yet. So here is the deal. You can either write to info@softwaretestpro.com, or even better, feel free to put your questions directly to Michael at his email ID, which is michael@developsense.com. If needed, please write to us and we'll share his email ID. All the questions will be shared with Michael along with the emails, and if he's able to respond to them, that will be great at his side. So that will be all for now. So thank you, Michael. It was a very insightful session, and many thanks for sharing your candid thoughts on all aspects of testing. That really helps a lot. I'm sure our attendees found it very, very informative and useful too. I hope to see you in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. I know we will see each other. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you very much. Once again, I want to emphasize what Smita says. I'm happy to take questions anytime. Michael@developsense.com. and I can respond to those. Some of the questions that I received are going to need some framing, so it will help to do that in a more conversational kind of way through email or perhaps through instant messaging services or Skype or something like that. So I encourage people, if your question means something to you, if it matters to you, by all means, drop me a line and I will do my best to provide you with a response.
Yes. And in fact, I was about to say that, Michael, that during this process, I realized there were quite a few questions which were either too generic or not framed properly. And it is a learning for all of us as testers to be more contextual and specific when asking a question. It helps both the parties, the one who has to answer and the one who's seeking answers. And this becomes especially more important when we are not having a discussion. Yeah.
That's a really good point, Smita, that if you frame the question properly, you will often find yourself being able to answer it yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's an important practice for testers to engage in, it seems to me.
Yep. Yeah, especially because we don't have the opportunity to ask for clarifications real time. So, yeah. All right. Overall, a very fulfilling session, Michael. Thank you again, and I hope to see you at STPCon in San Francisco.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for your participation here today.
Okay. Everyone, this concludes our webinar for today. Thank you for joining in, and more importantly, thanks for sending in your questions and making the most of the webinar for yourself and the whole group. If you want to see more such sessions from speakers like Michael and others, and wish to learn more about testing, do come over to STPCon Spring 2019. Stay tuned for more webinars and online trainings coming soon at SoftwareTestPro.com. And if you haven't yet signed up for the upcoming webinar, which is Solving Performance Problems with AI on 13th of March by Mark Tomlinson, please do so. The link is up for your review and registration at SoftwareTestPro.com. Please go ahead. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week ahead. See you all in San Francisco in April 2019. And keep practicing your testing skills. We learned so much today from Michael. Please try and put that in practice. Thank you.